Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Stephen. I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I've also moved slightly in the room because I'm recording on the hottest day of the year again, and it's really sticky, so I've got bored and moved the camera around, and there you go. Today I am talking about writing as a career, or writing as a longevity as a writer, and it was spurred by two things. One thing I wanted to talk about anyway, and then also I received a question that ties into this. So the question was, what should you do if the type of book that you're writing doesn't really have an audience, if it combines different genres in a way that it doesn't really sit within an existing niche? Someone's saying, should you even bother pursuing it to publication, or should you write for your own enjoyment? And that kind of ties into what I'm going to be talking about today, to do with writing as a career versus writing as a hobby versus writing as something that you just want to do and have to do. So whether you are self-published or traditionally published, this goes back to the fundamental question: why do you want to be a writer? What do you want to get from it? Are you wanting to just do it for a hobby, just for something because you like doing it? Are you driven by it? What is it that's making you write? If it's just because you have to write and you don't care about sales and you're not worried about making a career, if you know that in your mind and you've accepted that and that's all you're doing it for, then that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. If someone sort of says you have to be business minded and you have to do all this stuff and you have to kind of think it and take it seriously, if you just enjoy writing and you just want to write books and have some stories and share them with some friends, great, that's brilliant. Don't let anybody tell you that that's not right. It's just what fits with you. It's if you want to do other stuff with your writing, you have to think about some of these other aspects to do with if it's commercial and the business part of your brain, which has to be balanced out with the creative side. The other thing to think about is, if you're wanting to take it a bit more seriously and pursue it in some kind of professional capacity, you have to accept something else, which is the majority of writers have to fit in their writing around everything else in their life, which means most of the time a full-time job, or sometimes a part-time job, but also friends and family, raising a family, living with your partner, your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, wherever it might be, having a social life, having other hobbies and everything else, and fitting all of that together and fitting your writing in. And yes, I've spoken about this on other videos. You have to make some kind of sacrifices for time to make the time for writing. You give up something else because it's necessary, but it is possible. But you have to accept that almost all writers, self-published or traditionally published, do it around a job, and that's just part of the game. Now, you can all talk about all the big names that you know, that you see on the shelves in all of the supermarkets and that kind of thing, that are on TV and they're known, they have adaptations and this kind of thing, but they're the tip of the spear. They're a very small number, and I've spoken about this before as well. If you think about actors, you can talk about your Tom Cruises and your Nicole Kidmans and all the rest of it, but then there's the next tier down of actors, the B-list, the C-list, the D-list. And there's that guy, I recognise him, he's been in a bunch of Tom Cruise films. Yeah, but you probably can't actually name him, but he's probably got like 400 acting credits because he's a jobbing actor. And there again, he might have those things alongside another career. And it's the same with writing. We're not sort of doing other writing, well, you could be, which I'll come on to that in a minute, but most of the time, writers have day jobs and then they have their writing, and that's just how it is. Is your goal as a writer to be able to do it full time? That you want this to be your career? You want to be able to sit down and have this as your main source of income, so that you can put other things aside and just focus purely on this? You don't have to have a full or part-time job in addition to your writing. If that's what you want to do, then great, that's something you should have in your mind. If your goal is to be rich because of your writing, then I hate to kind of be the one to break this to you, but it's not going to happen. It's even more unlikely than winning the lottery. It's so random, it's so uncontrollable, it can't be predicted, it can't be measured. The only thing you can do is produce a body of work and hope that if you produce enough books that generate enough income, then you'd be able to do it full time. But if you're writing because you're expecting it's a surefire way to get rich, like some of the really big name authors out there, then it's not going to happen, and you should try something else that's got a much higher success rate and far less risk. The other thing to think about, which is probably somewhere where I fit in, is, are you writing because you have to, because you're just kind of driven to? And if you don't tell these stories, you'd kind of go a little bit crazy. You'd feel you just have all these things churning around in your head. I'm someone that, I'm not being a braggart here to say, oh, I have so many ideas, but there's always things cooking up in my head and I write them down. Yeah, some of them will be crap and I know that, but I have to put them down on paper. I'm just always generating things and putting them down and think about them and go away and work on some of them. And some of them I never touch again. But that's just how my brain works. I'm a storyteller. I have to write these ideas down. I have to explore them. It's something that I'm compelled to do. That's one of the reasons I'm a writer. My other goal is to be able to do it full time, which I'm not doing yet. And I only know of maybe 2 or 3 authors out of the many, many, many dozens of authors that I know who are doing it full time. But that is my ultimate goal. All of this ties back to the original question that I was sent in regarding writing something, if it's commercial or not. So when you're a writer like me who's trying to do it as a career, whether it's part-time or full-time, but you're hoping to grow and be able to do it full-time, you have to wear 2 hats. You have to have the creative hat and also the commercial hat. If you write something and you take it to an agent and your agent likes it enough and then they try and take it to a publisher and the publisher says, this is so niche, this is so weird, I don't know where it sits in the market, I don't have any comparisons, therefore it's a really difficult sell. Now there are 2 things that could happen. My gut tells me, most of the time they will say, I don't think we can go anywhere with this because we don't know what to do with it. It might be that they say, we'll take a risk on it and we'll take it forward, but we're going to offer you a much smaller advance because therefore it's less risk for us, because we put a load of money into it hoping that it's going to be one of those lightning bolt books that transforms the market or creates a brand new wave. Those are very, very rare and they're never anticipated, and they don't sort of say, right, we'll put £1 million into it and then it'll explode. It's one of these things where they take a gamble, they put it out, suddenly it all goes crazy, then they pour lots of money into PR and promotion, and then suddenly the sales start rocketing and everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. But if you take something to them that's so weird and they don't have any comparisons with it, it's then up to you to decide what you want to do with it. Or even if you're in the ideas stage and you're developing it and you know that there's nothing out there like it, what do you want to do with it? Do you just want to put the book out and have it read by a few people? Then you could do that. You can self-publish it. There's no reason that you couldn't. If the idea is to just get the story out there, then you can go for it. But if you're thinking, I want to use this as a stepping stone in my career, as a book, the one of many on the road to becoming a full-time author, then my gut would be not to move forward with it. And I've spoken about this once before when I said I had an idea for an urban fantasy novel. I was in the early stages of it. I talked about it with my agent and she said, now isn't the right time because the market was saturated. It wasn't really a good time. There's so many other good things on that I had put it out. It probably got lost in the shuffle unless it was so radically different. My editor may have taken it on. There again, they may have offered me a much smaller advance, but also it's a bit of a sideways step from what I'm doing now, which is kind of epic fantasy. So I didn't go forward with it. I may do it again in the future. I may go to my editor, my agent, and say, what's the market like now? But I rely on her expertise to tell me if it's good enough at the moment. And that's, of course, her commercial knowledge, which comes from having worked in the industry and from effectively keeping her finger on the pulse, which I try to do, but I'm not as integrated in the editor space as she is. Another way to think about the commercial side of it is when you're starting to develop an idea, how commercially focused are you? How mercenary, in a way, are you with the developing this idea? And I'm not saying mercenary as a bad way in this aspect. It can be a very good thing. So say you know that at the moment there's a certain thing that's popular, and now you should never chase a trend, but if there are certain things that are evergreen, or there's a style of book that's quite evergreen that you know is good, then you could do something like that. And also if you know that if you can hit several different demographics in terms of age, then you get a much bigger audience. And then perhaps you think, some people don't like swearing, so if there's no swearing that, then it's not going to offend some people, then you might get some of those readers in. So you could, at the beginning of developing your story, whatever it's going to be, you could tailor it really specifically to try and get the widest possible audience in the hope of capturing the biggest market and therefore getting more sales. And that's really going into it with a commercial mind. And I know there are some writers that do that. They still have the original idea, the kind of seed of the idea that they're developing, but once they take it forward, they then adjust it according to current market trends information that they get from other writers and what's going on, talking to their agent, talking to their editor and saying, is now a good time for this kind of thing, that when the book comes out in 1 to 2 years' time, do you think it would be a good commercial fit? Should I pursue it? Should I start on this journey of writing this book? Because it takes, 6, 9, 12 months to write a book. Then it has to go through the cycle of being published. It has to be edited, proof, cover design, promotion, marketing, all this kind of stuff, and that can add another year to it. So it can be 1 to 2 years. Even if you do all of that, even if you tick all of these boxes, even if you make the book as commercial as you think it can be, there's still no guarantee that it will sell and that it will hit all of those markets. You're trying to do it, you're trying to hit all these different demographics, but there's no guarantee either. And here's the bit I really hate. I'm going to have to say it, but I hate this word. Ugh. How much is it for you about the craft of what you're producing and also the art of the book? Are you writing something that you want to hold true to the vision of what you've got in your mind? For me, I don't like the word art. It makes it sound like it's a bloody painting or something. It's not. I have a story in mind, and yes, there's some adjustments in the editorial process, but I never deviate from the clarity of the vision in my book. If someone had said to me on my earlier books, my earlier fantasy books, if you tone down the swearing in the books, I think it would do a lot better. That would have been a conversation we would have had, and I would have to have dramatically changed the story, because the first book, Battle Mage, is all set around a war, and I wanted to make it as authentic as possible. And being authentic for me is that some of the characters in the books are frontline warriors, which I'm paralleling to frontline soldiers, and these are people who live right on the edge of the war. They face death every day, they're really close to it, and so they live sort of extremes. They celebrate very much after the fact of them surviving. They drink, they fight. Warning, includes salty language, just quickly. Okay. They drink hard, they fight hard to celebrate the fact that they're still alive, and yes, they fuck as well, and they swear, and I have all of that in my books, and to make it authentic. If I'd been asked, could you tone this down to make them, we don't have any of that kind of content, therefore maybe it could be like a YA audience, I would have gone back and said no, because even the British soldiers don't sit around after a victory or a really bad day fighting and sip tea and say, "Ooh, that was lovely, that was a tough day, but this cup of tea has regenerated me." No, they don't. They go out and they get drunk and they celebrate, and they just celebrate being alive, and I wanted that realism in my books, and so I didn't tone any of that down, and I wouldn't have done that even if they said, oh, but it might encapsulate a different audience and bring other people in, because that's not the kind of writer I am. I'm commercially minded. I'm writing something that's for a commercial audience. It's not very, very niche, but equally I don't want to deviate too much and change the focus of my book to make it something that's not authentic, because then I wouldn't feel proud about my work and I couldn't stand behind it, and when people question me about it, I'd be like, well, yeah, I wrote this and I really enjoyed it and I'm really happy with it, because I wouldn't be. So that's kind of to do with the craft of the book and the commercial side versus how true you want to be to the vision of something that you've created. The other thing to think about when you're writing any book and you're going at it from a commercial side is to know your audience, or at least have an awareness of who they are. Now, I'm not writing for the audience, as in I don't think, well, what would they really like, and therefore I'm going to write that kind of thing. My books are typically trilogies, standalones, or duologies, and none of my books are really massive. They're never sort of 700, 800, 900 pages long and book one of a 10-part series. That's just not my kind of thing. That's not what I do. There are readers who like that kind of thing, but I know that some of the people, or most of the people who are reading my kind of books, want something that's a bit leaner, a bit pacier, and a bit faster. So I'm not going to suddenly start writing these 800-page sagas because I want to try and capture those readers. Some of them might come over and read my kind of stuff anyway because they have more kind of an open mind, but I'm not tailoring it in that way. Also, as I've talked about, I have adult content in my book. There are some authors that don't. They kind of veer away from that. They choose to make up swearing, which I've spoken about in another video before. They don't have extreme violence. They sort of tone it down. It's not that it's a YA book, but they don't kind of delve into it, whereas I want more of that realism that in the middle of a fight there are blood and guts and gore flying all over. Now, I'm not doing it for titillation. Likewise with the swearing, I'm not doing because I think it's it's so funny. I'm like a teenager who thinks it's cool to swear. I'm doing it because I want to make it authentic for that situation. And there again, if the readers are looking for that kind of thing, even, yes, realism within a fantasy book, they know that that's what they're going to get when they pick up one of my books. So I'm not writing for a specific person, I'm not writing with them in mind, but I'm aware of the kind of reader who would like my books, and that I think is important. So what are some of the keys for longevity as a writer if you're trying to be a commercial writer, whether it's self-published or traditionally published? And these are just my ideas. I think some people would agree with them, some people might not, but you know, that's fine. The first thing goes back to which I did on a previous video and I've spoken about in the past, which is not burning bridges, not pissing off agents, not replying to them, even if you send in a submission and the response you get back doesn't make any sense and you don't feel like they've read it. Don't piss them off, don't burn your bridges. The industry is quite small, people talk. So a key to longevity is getting along with people, getting along with your peers, your editors, agents, because you may have more than one editor and more than one agent in your career. Some of my friends there have had agents who've retired, they've left the business and gone on to do something else. Some agents have moved into an editorial space sometimes, or they've gone the other way. Editors who've then left the publishing side of working for a larger company and then have set up themselves as an agent and then develop their own agency. So people move around. But it's good to have these contacts because somebody you meet one day could be an assistant and in 5 years' time they could be running one of the publishing companies that you want to write to. So getting along with people I think is key to being productive and staying a writer. I think the second key to longevity is to produce work on time, regularly, and to do it consistently. There again, it works on both sides, self-published or traditional. You're trying to grow your audience, you're trying to produce a body of work, you want to be seen as someone who's reliable, dependable, you get a deadline, you hit it, you don't cause any problems, and it goes through and it comes out smoothly. That's what they want, that's the kind of person that people want to work with. The third thing which ties into that, I would say, which is don't cause any waves. Now, that's not to say you can't have an opinion. That's not to say if they ask you to make some changes to a book, you just kind of go along with it. And some people say you don't have any control if you're traditionally published, which is bollocks. And I've spoken about this before in my myths of traditional publishing videos, which I'll put a link to here. What I'm saying is, learn the processes. If you have an issue with something in your book, you go and talk to your editor about it. You don't kick off. You don't sort of spout online on social media and start causing up a storm like that. You don't want to cause waves. You don't want to be pushing your political, religious, whatever it might, moral views online and causing problems. There are some companies that if you do work for aren't comfortable with people like that. And I mentioned before you could have other avenues of work in addition to producing your own books. You could be doing work for hire, you could be doing ghost writing, and all of these are other sources of income. And if you're working for a large company, working on their IP, Marvel, DC or whatever, they do novels, and you start producing a book for them and you've signed a contract, and then you go online and you say some awful, awful things that are so against their brand, that make them so uncomfortable as a company, that they start getting complaints, you're not the kind of person they would want to work with. They might see that contract out, or they might cancel you and just get rid of you, which has happened to some authors who have been so politically outspoken, which is fine, but they were so vitriolic in the way they went about it that Marvel said, no, you're damaging the brand, you're damaging the IP, potential sales on this book because of what you've done could harm the audience and it could split sales, so we're not interested anymore, goodbye. So when I say don't cause waves, that's something if you want to accept, you have to deal with when you're part of the industry. As I said, another key to longevity is to have other sources of income. It might be that you're attending events and getting paid for them, you're doing online workshops like, oh hello, I've got some of those coming up online. It might be that you run a Patreon, oh look, there's a link to Headspace below if you want to join a private writing community. It might be like my friend Michelle Susterman, who I've done a live stream with a while ago. She is a ghostwriter and she has her own books and she does some other things on the side, and she writes full time, but not just on her own books. so she's got other sources of income that contribute to enough of an income for her to live on with, and carry doing that full time. And that's what a lot of us want to do. If you don't sell enough books off your own, you can do it with other bits and pieces to write full time, which is, hopefully the dream. And I think that is a very important key to longevity. It's all about finding balance. It's all about what you want to do with your writing in terms of, is it an aspect of your life and something you want to do every day? Is it just a hobby that you want to pursue? Is it something that you're so commercially driven that you want to keep progressing and growing your audience and developing? Or do you just want to tell some good stories, get some good feedback, meet people, join the community? And that's another kind of key to longevity, is being an active part of your community, talking to other agents, editors, writers, getting to know them. Because writing is very, very solitary. You're sitting in the room by yourself, and I love meeting other writers and talking to them, because they understand all the things that I'm going through, they understand all of the struggles, and when I go to one of these conventions and talk to them, it's so much fun. I just feel energized, I feel rewarded, I feel part of a community that understands everything that I'm going through, and you can't really beat that. And then I get back and start writing again, and I feel good about it. And I talk to people online on social media, of course, these days, and you do it every day. And that's another thing to kind of keep you driven, keep you motivated. Word counts, all these things are good, but having other people in the same boat is a real, real help. Slightly rambly today. I do plan my videos. You probably don't think I do. I have notes and stuff, and I make them, and I've rambled a little bit today, but I think hopefully that's been useful. I've got some other different types of videos coming up soon. I've got a couple more late night talk interviews with authors, and I'm probably going to do a late live stream to celebrate my 1K, reaching 1K in the subscribers, and some other things I'm planning, which I'll announce in the next few months. But yeah, that'll be it for today. I'll be back next week with another video.